We got the audience. Oh, and then there's me.
All three. Okay. So, a couple years ago, I decided to go on vacation with some of my friends, and we spent a week in Oahu. We ended up staying with my friend's uncle, and while we were there, we wanted to go on a bunch of different hikes. So he took us on a really popular local hike. When we got to the entrance of the hike, we noticed that there was like a bunch of super old, rotten shoes everywhere. There were some like scattered on the ground, and some were like thrown up in the trees, and we were like, why are these shoes here? We should just go on this hike anyways. So as we were going, we like really quickly realized why all those shoes were there, because the entire trail was covered in really thick, deep mud, and you really couldn't walk on the trail unless you were like tiptoeing on the protruding tree roots that were coming up. So it was kind of tricky, but we kept on our hike anyways. And we finally got to this waterfall that had like a pond, and it was really pretty. My friends were talking about these natural water slides that were like past the waterfall, and we were like, we have to go to those. But the only way to get like past the waterfall was to swim through the pond, and I had been trying really hard to keep my feet clean, like avoiding as much mud as possible and not getting wet. And we were looking around to the sides, and like on the sides of the waterfall were these giant stone walls, so there was no way to get around this little pond except to swim across. So we decided to swim, and while we were at the top of the waterfall, we jumped off a few times and then decided to keep going. And then the trail slowly became less of the muddy mess it was before, and it was this shallow rocky creek that we were following. So we followed it until we got to this giant bridge, and it wasn't like any normal bridge. It was really high. Like you had to like rock climb to get to the ladder to climb up to the top of the bridge. So we were just like, holy moly, it's so tall. And as we were looking up, we noticed that all of the slates in the bridge were like wooden slates. They were missing like a bunch of them, and all the wood was like rotting and breaking. We're like, that looks very reliable. And we also noticed that all of the metal was starting to rust too, like on the ladder that goes up, like all the way across the bridge. And we were like, let's do it. This is going to be a great adventure. So we started to rock climb. I had one friend above me, one friend below me, and we got to like the bottom of the ladder part when we heard this noise. So we like looked around, and our friend had fallen off, and we looked down at her face, and all I remember is that she's just falling with her arms straight up, like looking so confused at us. And we were like, not only worried that she was falling, but we were also worried because the creek was literally like 2 inches deep of shallow water, super sharp rocks, and we were like, she might not make it. So we had hurried all the way back down and went to her, and I don't know if it was sheer luck or like grand design, but she landed perfectly in the middle of these 4 sharp rocks, stood up, and only had like one minor cut on her. We were like, okay, let's keep going. So we went all the way to the water slides. They weren't as cool as we thought they were, but it was still kind of fun to go there. And we headed back to the cars, and it turns out it's a lot harder to walk on tree roots when your feet are soaked and already kind of muddy. And so I just gave up, and I was like, well, these shoes are like gonna be done for. So we walked in the mud, and it was just disastrous. I felt like I was ice skating. I couldn't keep my balance. I was hugging trees, and like everybody was far ahead because they've done this a million times. And when I finally got to the beginning of the trail, I was like, well, I looked down at my shoes, and they were covered in mud, and I was like, I don't think I can keep these anymore. So I took them off and threw them with the rest of the shoes at the beginning of the trail. Thanks.